Hi guys, and welcome to my blog channel, My Life with Cats. Whoa! Sorry, there was a cat, just case in point. Okay, sorry about that guys. So anyways, welcome to my blog channel. Again, it's My Life with Cats, and this is where I share some of my life experiences and some of the things I've gone through in the hopes of letting others know that we can get through tough times in life and you don't have to do it alone. And there is hope, ultimately. Obviously, you guys got a little brief. That was Sadie earlier. She was letting me know she needed my attention. So, anyways, I have two beautiful fur babies, Sadie and Louie. So they may or may not make appearances in these videos. So I hope that's okay. That's kind of part of living with cats. Also, I'd like this channel to be a safe place for people to come as they are. I personally don't wear makeup. I have high functioning autism, and honestly I don't like the way makeup feels on my face, and it makes my face break out, and for me it's a personal decision that I just feel more comfortable without it. And I welcome people from any background, whether you love to do yourself up to the nines or you just don't really care to, whatever, however you are comfortable, come as you are. I just hope that you guys in the comments, we can keep things respectful towards each other and keep this a safe place for everyone. Okay guys, so before I get into my experience with Cauda Equina syndrome, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Cauda Equina syndrome is and some of the red flag symptoms are, or symptoms that you should really probably head to a doctor or the emergency room if you are experiencing, and what some of the long-term consequences of Cauda Equina syndrome can be. The first thing I wanted to address was, where does the name Cauda Equina syndrome come from? The Cauda Equina are the bundle of nerves that are at the base of your spinal cord, and these nerves flare out like a horse's tail. So in Latin, Cauda Equina means horse's tail. So, and these nerves are responsible for sensory and motor functions of your legs and feet, as well as the function of all your pelvic organs, like your bladder and your bowels and your reproductive organs. I would like to give a fair warning to you guys as we're going through talking about Cauda Equina syndrome and some of the symptoms and some of the things I experienced, that while we are talking about things in medical terminologies, there are some unpleasantries that we'll be talking about. We will be talking about some bodily functions that can be affected by Cauda Equina syndrome, as well as some of the surgical procedures that I have experience with. Cauda Equina syndrome occurs when these nerves, the Cauda Equina, get compressed by something, and basically the person loses all feeling and function from the waist down. That's it in a nutshell. We're going to break it down just a little bit more. And something to keep in mind, guys, is that Cauda Equina syndrome is a rare syndrome, and it's not something that a lot of people are going to experience in their lifetime. And according to, let's see, one of the sources, the Cleveland Clinic, and some other sources I've looked at, 1 in 65,000 people will be affected by Cauda Equina syndrome in their lifetime. So it is possible, but it's not anything to be overly afraid of, and that's not the point of this video, is not to incite fear. It's just simply to give some information so that if you or someone you love are experiencing any of the symptoms of Cauda Equina syndrome, you can get prompt medical treatment and hopefully not have permanent repercussions. So if this nerve compression is not treated promptly, a person can experience sensory and motor defects in their legs and feet, which can include complete paralysis. A person can also experience incontinence of the bowels and or bladder, which basically means you can't hold in, you have no control over the emptying of your bowels and or bladder. So there can be many causes of Cauda Equina syndrome, including birth anomalies, lumbar stenosis, which is narrowing of the spinal canal in your lower back, injuries to your lower back, spinal infections, lesions, tumors, and the most common cause is a large herniated disc in your lower back. Also, complications from a failed lower back surgery can cause Cauda Equina syndrome. So, what are some of the red flag symptoms of Cauda Equina syndrome? One big indicator that what you're experiencing may be Cauda Equina syndrome is something that is called saddle anesthesia. And what this is numbness in your inner thighs, your butt, and basically anything that would touch a saddle if you were sitting on the back of a horse. Another red flag symptom is paralysis or weakness in one or both of your legs. Also problems having sex. Pain or sciatica, which is pain that shoots basically from your hip or your back area all the way down to your heel. And that again can be in one or both of your legs. And probably the biggest red flag is any urinary or bowel incontinence. A person can have what is called retention, meaning you have to go to the bathroom and you try to go and nothing happens, but you do have that urge, but you just can't go. A person might also experience problems with their reflexes, and for example, with me, I still to this day do not have any reflexes at my Achilles tendon. I do not have any of those reflexes in either foot to this day. And that can contribute to problems with walking properly and having a quote-unquote normal gait. Also, if a person is experiencing tingling, burning, or numbness in their legs and or feet. So Cauda Equina syndrome can come on suddenly, which is called acute Cauda Equina syndrome, and this usually happens in less than 24 hours from the start of symptoms to full-blown Cauda Equina syndrome. Or it can come on, or a person's symptoms can come on gradually over a period of days, weeks, or even months. Another thing I'd like to add is Cauda Equina syndrome can be complete, meaning there is urinary and or bladder incontinence, or they can experience incomplete Cauda Equina syndrome, which just simply means that there is no urinary or bowel incontinence. All the information I just gave you guys can be found anywhere online if you Google Cauda Equina syndrome. But just so you guys know, I'm not just pulling stuff out of my rear end. This information specifically came from Cleveland Clinic and spinehealth.com. I'd like to add, guys, that I am not a medical professional in any way. I am simply trying to share information with you guys for educational purposes only. This information is not intended to diagnose anybody with any condition. If you have concerns about your physical or your mental health, please consult a medical professional. Do not consult people on the internet. Before I share my experience with Cauda Equina syndrome, I'd like to say, guys, that before this happened, I had only had one very minor surgery. I had my wisdom teeth extracted when I was 16, and I had never had any physical medical problems that required extensive treatment. I had no experience of talking to surgeons or all these different specialists, and so I really didn't understand that side of the medical world as a patient so much. I also believe that some of the problems that I incurred, because I am very stubborn and I have a thing about going to the doctor, I get nervous. I think it's an anxiety thing. I get really anxious if I think I need to go to the doctor because I'm always afraid they'll say, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, and just send me home, and it's a big old waste of everybody's time and resources. So I don't tend to go to the doctor unless there's something really wrong, and it's usually beyond when I should have gone. So please keep that in mind, because I know looking back on this, there are things where I'm just like, why didn't you just go to the doctor? But again, lessons learned. So my experience with Cauda Equina syndrome begins in October of 2021. And I woke up one morning and I had pain in my right leg and my lower back hurt. And I thought, no big deal. We'll just, carry on with our day. Well, this gradually got worse and it started going into my other leg, and I looked it up and I saw that it was most likely sciatica, and I read that sciatica usually resolves itself. So I thought, okay, no big deal, it'll work itself out. Well, this pain continued to get worse. It was like, the pain continued to get worse. It would wake me up in the middle of the night, and it would wake me up early in the morning, and I couldn't go back to sleep, and I absolutely dreaded getting out of bed because it was just so painful. And I kept thinking, oh, it'll get better, it's probably not a big deal. But then by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, I could barely sit. It was so painful, and both my feet swelled up and were going numb. So I made an appointment to go to my GP's office, my general practitioner. Sorry about that, guys, my battery died. But so I made an appointment at my general practitioner's office, and they gave me a shot of steroids, some low-dose pain pills, and some muscle relaxers, and sent me for an MRI of my back. So I went back to my GP's office, and she said I needed to see a spine specialist and referred me over to a specialist. And I got in to see this guy before I got my MRI results back, and I told him what was going on, and I had the sciatica in both of my legs, and it was getting worse, and it was really painful, and the ibuprofen wasn't really working. And I'd like to also add, guys, I have a pretty high pain tolerance, and I didn't, before all this started, I didn't even have any Tylenol or ibuprofen in the house because I just really wouldn't use it unless there was something, unless I had just something really, unless I had a really bad headache or something. And so I went from having no, there's Sadie, I went from having no ibuprofen in the house or Tylenol to having, come on baby girl. Okay, sorry. So I went from having no Tylenol or ibuprofen in the house to having 1,000 capsule bottles of ibuprofen and 500 capsule bottles of Tylenol. And so the spine specialist said we should try an epidural. And I thought, okay, cool, let's do it. So while I was waiting for my MRI results, I received a phone call from my GP's office. She proceeded to tell me that I had a large herniated disc at the L5-S1 level, which is at the very bottom of your lower back, and it was causing severe spinal stenosis. She asked me, what did you do to your back? And I said, I have no idea. I don't know what I did. But, and asked me if I'd seen the spine specialist, and I told her that we were going to do an epidural. And she said, go ahead and do the epidural, but don't be disappointed if it doesn't work. I'm not a surgeon, but this looks like you'll probably have to have surgery to fix it. And she knew me very well. At this point, I'd seen her for 7 or 8 years. And she said, if it doesn't work, do not sit at your house for months in pain. Get it seen about as soon as possible. So after I had that epidural done, I went back to the spine specialist with my MRI report, and he was reading it, and he kind of shook his head and was like, And I was like, okay. And we proceeded to talk about how effective the epidural was. And I said, well, it seemed to make my left leg a little better, but my right leg is still bad. So he suggested that we do a second epidural. And I thought, okay, fine. I was never even told about Cauda Equina syndrome when large herniated discs in your lumbar region or lower back is the most common cause of Cauda Equina syndrome. Just so you guys know. And I was already having bilateral sciatica, or sciatica in both my legs, and I was having tingling and numbness going on in my feet. All kind of signs that should have been thrown flags. Anyways, so after I had the second epidural, I was laying down, because you have to lay flat after epidurals, but I was laying down and I was looking at possible surgeries that they do, because I just had a feeling about this based on the reactions of the medical professionals who had seen my MRI results. And I saw something about Cauda Equina syndrome and spinal fusion, and I very quickly was like, nope, we're not doing either of those. That's not going to happen. Like, I can control what happens, right? I mean, come on, that's just my crazy brain sometimes. After the second epidural, that didn't really help, and I was asked if I was having any incontinence issues, and I wasn't. And so in my mind, I thought as long as I wasn't having incontinence, everything was fine. So he referred me then to talk to one of their surgeons, and I wound up talking to his PA, and he told me we could go ahead and do surgery right away and fix the issue and be done with it. And he was talking about spinal fusion, and that freaked me out because I really didn't understand a whole lot about spinal fusion. But and then he said, or you can, I'm sorry, Sadie is playing. He said, or we can do physical therapy, or you can do physical therapy and a third epidural. And I have no experience with any of this. I didn't know what the best thing to do was, so I asked him, I said, what would you do if it was you? And he said, I would do the third epidural and physical therapy. So I was like, okay. And I did that. And while we were waiting on the third epidural, I started physical therapy. And some things were kind of helping, and it wasn't really going very well. It was kind of staying a lot the same. And I got frustrated because I felt like I wasn't being heard by these people, and I didn't feel like physical therapy was doing any good. And so I was like, I'm going to get a second opinion. And I went outside the hospital system that we were in, because another thing was I didn't want to have a major surgery at that particular hospital just because of personal experiences I had had. So while I was waiting for this second opinion, which was going to be, I believe it was March 17th, we were doing physical therapy, and things just weren't going very well. And the physical therapist even told me, I think you're going to need to talk to the surgeon when you see him about other treatment options, because we just couldn't get any good results of physical therapy. So I went to So I went to see this other surgeon, and at this time I wasn't driving long distances, because when I would sit back in the driver's seat or I'd sit back in the couch, my feet would go numb. And so my mom drove me, and this guy was like 45 minutes away, and he did his exam. And I wasn't able to do some of the physical things he was wanting me to do. And he saw my MRI result. Nobody ever did another MRI at this point. And this is March 17th. And I had had the first MRI in December, and I had told them that things were continuing to get worse. And he kind of looked at me and said most herniated discs are reabsorbed by the body in about 7 months, and we're 5 months into this, and I got the gist that he wanted me to wait another couple months because he said 98% of herniated discs do not need surgery. And I felt so defeated, and I know he could see it, and I could hardly sit still because I was so uncomfortable. And he said, we'll do the third epidural, and if that doesn't work, we'll do surgery. And he did prescribe me gabapentin, which is used for nerve pain. And I was just kind of flabbergasted because I was seeing this specialist, and the whole time I was seeing them, I had called them and asked if they could prescribe me maybe some prescription ibuprofen or something to help with the pain I was in, and they never once mentioned nerve medication when sciatica occurs when your nerves are compressed. And so logically nerve medication would be working better than Tylenol ibuprofen. Anyways, so that was March 17th. And I kind of went home, and I was really disappointed because I still felt like I wasn't being taken seriously. I felt like this wasn't normal. And by the 28th of March, I was going to the grocery store, and I sat in my car, like, to drive, and the grocery store's only like 7 minutes away or so. And by the time I got to the grocery store, I was like, I don't know if I should be driving because I was really hurting a lot more than normal. And I was like, well, I'm here, I'll get a few things, then I'll go straight home. And I went home and I laid down on the couch. And when I went to get up from the couch, I was hit with the most excruciating pain. It was like these sharp, stabbing, electric, I don't even know how to describe it, just shooting, searing pain from my back and in my legs, and to the point where I could hardly walk, and I had to hold on to different things in the house to try to get just even to anywhere in the house. And later that night, my dear friend wound up taking me to the emergency room, and I was back where I kind of didn't really want to be in, but something had to be done. And the doctor was doing his exam, and we were waiting for the nurse to come back in, because we were waiting for the nurse to come in, and I realized that I had not peed in like 12 or 14 hours, and I looked at my friend and said, I think I might need to go to the bathroom. And so she helped me because I could not walk from point A to point B at all. And she helped me, and I went, and I did have to go. And so I did not know this at the time, but that was another big red flag because I was having trouble discerning whether I needed to go to the restroom or not. And that's a big red flag that things are getting worse. And I didn't think to tell this doctor just because the pain was so much and it was overwhelming. But anyways, he did his exam, and they gave me a steroid shot, a pain medication shot, and a prescription for some strong pain medicine, and I believe some muscle relaxers. And he said that usually when herniated discs get as bad as this one was, that they need surgery. And he asked if I wanted him to refer me to a surgeon. I said, no, sir, I have one, I'll contact. So we left there, and I was a bit nervous about the pain medicine because I'm in recovery, and one of my things near the end of my drinking and stuff was I really liked pain pills, and I remembered how much I did. I remembered how much I liked pain pills, and my sobriety is supremely important to me. So I get home and I get through the weekend, and the pain was subsiding, and by the time Sunday rolled around, I realized that it was getting more difficult for me to get up the stairs that led up to my porch. I have 5 steps out front. That was becoming a lot more difficult to do. I needed a cane to steady myself, and my feet were going numb, and at this point my butt and my inner thighs were numb. And again, I hadn't been told these symptoms, and I just thought that something was really wrong. I called the surgeon's office first thing Monday morning, and I explained to the doctor what was going on and the sudden onset of the severe pain, and then the numbness coming, and I can't feel my butt, and I'm having trouble discerning if I need to pee, and I'm having trouble walking now, and my feet are going numb in my legs. And they just simply asked me if I had control of my bowels and bladder, and I said yes, but I'm having trouble discerning when I need to go. And then she just said, well, can you wait and we'll call you back? And I said, I guess. I didn't know that at that point I should have been going to the ER. Because with Cauda Equina syndrome, people usually need to be treated within 24 to 48 hours for best results. I mean, that's kind of debatable, but that was pretty universal when I was reading too. But so I was like, okay. And the next day, again, my mom was taking me to get this 3rd epidural. I never heard back from the surgeon's office, so I was like, well, maybe, I guess it's not anything to be that concerned about. But when I went to get the 3rd epidural, we were sitting in the waiting room, and I could literally feel my feet becoming more and more numb. And I looked at my mom and I said, what are we going to do if I can't walk? And she kind of looked at me and she was like, well, I don't know. And so when we were talking to the doctor, and he was going to do this epidural, and I told him what had been happening over the past few days, and I told him I wasn't walking with a cane before Friday, and this was on a Tuesday, and I had this increasing numbness and all this stuff. I explained everything that was going on, and he said, hang on, sit up, and he did some tests, and he said, you need to go to the ER. This is a surgical emergency, and you need to go sooner rather than later. So we went to the ER. When I was at the ER, finally somebody did another MRI scan, and the tech there, he asked me, he said, what did you do to your back? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea. And I met with the surgeon, and I was to have the surgery the next afternoon. And that night was absolutely miserable. I do need to give a shout out, though, to the nurses at the Piedmont Hospital. And I specifically remember Wendy. She was above and beyond, as was the other gentleman who was working. They were so wonderful. She helped change my gown and my bedding when I had a panic attack, and I sweated through all this stuff, and she was helping me when I was still sort of able to get to a restroom. She was helping me with that, and she sat there and during the night and massaged my legs. In my left leg in particular, I was having these horrendous cramps, and they were really good at trying to help keep my pain manageable, and they just took really good care of me. And I don't think nurses get enough credit, because the medical community could not function without nurses. They do the jobs that nobody else wants to do, and they do the hard work. And I just really wanted to give a shout out to them because they were wonderful. And so the next day, I was going to have the surgery, and I was shown the MRI results, and you could see white in between each vertebrae until it got down to the very last one, the L5S1, and it was completely black, and all those nerves were completely compressed by this herniated disc. So the plan of action was they were going to do a laminectomy and a partial discectomy, which just means they were going to take off the top part of the vertebrae to make more room for the nerves and take out the damaged disc material and repair the disc. Because he was doing a more conservative approach because he said, you're young, and he didn't want to limit my range of motion. And so, so he did that, and I wound up going home to stay with my parents because I couldn't even bend over for 2 weeks after back surgery. Yeah, so, and their house is more handicap accessible. They have a ramp, and they have a shower chair and all kinds of stuff like that. And I just want to say I've been so blessed once again. I have wonderful friends, and I'm not just saying it for this, but they really stepped up to the plate, because at this point I had one beautiful, sweet little angel, Louie, who I still is part of my life, and he was my world, still is, and I have friends that would come and check on him and send me pictures of them hanging out with him, and you know, take care of all the nitty gritty of being of what you have to do with indoor cats. And I just really appreciate everyone. They went above and beyond. They always do. And so I was at my parents' house, and at this point, when I didn't have feeling from the waist down on my right side and from my knee down on my from the waist down on my left side and from the knee down on my right side, and I could barely walk with a walker. But guys, I kid you not, I was completely at peace with things. Even if things didn't get any better, I was so grateful to be out of that pain that I was in before for so many months. I mean, the pain after surgery is so different than the pain I was having before. That the after the surgery is more like a discomfort than anything, really, after that particular surgery. But I also found through this experience that when you're in pain and you take pain pills as prescribed, they work very differently than when you abuse them. So there's that helps with that. So I was doing everything that was suggested. I was walking every hour. My mom would walk with me at first because I was really unsteady at first, even with a walker. And I was doing it, gradually trying to increase. Another thing that had happened the Sunday before the surgery, and I had told this to the surgeon too, was I could not stand on my tippy toes or spread my toes apart. I completely lost that ability. So the way that affected after the surgery, that was still non-existent. I had no push-off. When you walk, you typically, walk through and push off with your toes, and I wasn't able to do that, so it was this really strange gait. It was almost like a tin soldier almost. And so that was a whole nother thing. And okay, so this was in early April, and I wound up back at the house, and in May I started physical therapy, and I still wasn't driving because of the numbness, and I didn't feel like it was safe. Because in my mind, it's one thing if something I do is going to affect just me, but if it's going to affect, innocent people or people in general around me, and it's a negative thing, it could be dangerous. I don't need to do it. So I started physical therapy, and we were working on toe push-offs, and we were also working on, I found, we discovered that the large muscles in my calves, especially my left leg, were not responding. They weren't really working. And so much smaller muscles within my legs were having to do all the work that your larger muscles would do. And this was causing a lot of pain and discomfort in my ankles. And so I was wearing braces and doing exercises at home and doing everything they were suggesting I do. And I moved from, I was using a cane to walk, and I eventually did start driving, and I eventually got some toe push off, which was awesome. That I still had kind of a wanky gait and wasn't walking real great. And so my surgeon referred me to a neurologist to make sure that my gait problems and balance problems were not caused by anything else other than the Cauda Equina. And a neurologist, she sent me for a brain MRI to make sure of these things. And while I was waiting to go, I was still doing PT, and I noticed that things were going really well, and I was driving again, and I wasn't walking great. It was still challenging. I had to go get a handicap parking tag, and that was a big deal to me. So I was going to PT, and I had this thought. I thought my feet were getting more numb, because my feet had been numb this whole time, and my calves were numb still. And so one day I finally just said to my physical therapist, I was like, I think my feet are going numb again. And she had said that she had noticed we were having some backslide in physical therapy. I was kind of dropping back a little bit. And she said, be sure to talk to your neurologist when you see her, because I was seeing her soon at this point. And so I saw her in January, and the brain MRI was normal, so it was all from Cauda Equina. And she was concerned. She did some tests, because I told her about these new symptoms that were coming, the numbness, and things were becoming more difficult. And she was concerned with my leg weakness, and she sent me for MRIs of my lower back, middle back, upper back, and nerve conduction tests to check for permanent nerve damage, and muscle tests where they test your nerves and your muscles to check for permanent damage. And it just so happens that the first MRI that I scheduled was for my lower back, and I had that done, and then I got a call back from her saying that I had another large herniated disc and I needed to call my surgeon. And I was like, wonderful. And this is in, I guess this would have been in February or something. Yeah, and so I called the surgeon, saw the PA, and she said, you do have a reherniation at L5S1, and it is a large herniation, and we'll have to do surgery, so you'll need to see the surgeon. So I went to see him to see what kind of surgery we'd need done, and he said we'd have to do spinal fusion at this point, which is just where they put in some rods and screws and fuse. In my case, it was just fusing the L5S1 vertebrae together so that it would be one bone instead of two. So you do lose a little range of motion, but this problem couldn't happen again. While I was waiting to have this surgery, my other MRIs came back clear, and at that point, the nerve conduction and muscle tests that they had done showed no permanent damage. So I was really feeling good about things. And guys, I never prepped for a major surgery, because my last surgery, was an emergency surgery, and there's really no prep for that. And for this one of the things we had to do, and this was, keep in mind, this was February, and for this surgery, one of the things was you had to get this antiseptic wash. It's like pink, and you can't get it in your eyes and all this stuff, but it's pink, and you lather up your whole body after you turn off the water. You lather up, in my case, the front and the back, and then you have to stand there for 5 minutes with no running water. And I'm cold-natured, and that was really cold, and I'd be standing there with the phone. I'd set a timer on my phone. I'd be standing there shivering, waiting, just looking at the phone. Those were the longest 5 minutes of my life, I swear. But anyways, we got through it. And in addition to that prep, because again, this is a trigger warning for anybody, but for this surgery, they would have to move my abdominal organs out of the way. So I had to do a prep that you do for a colonoscopy, which is just really not pleasant, but so that things would basically be pretty empty. So when I was waiting to go into the surgery, I was talking to the surgeon, and he told me, after we finish with the front, we may have to flip you over and go in through your back to put the screws in place. And I thought, oh, okay, because this is kind of the first I was hearing of it, but no big deal. All right. So I woke up from that surgery, and this surgery was more painful than the first one, for sure. But they did wind up having to go in through the front and the back. So I had 2 incisions, which, again, no big deal. But then, and this kind of trigger warning if y'all are sensitive to things, but I had a catheter, and I had bowel incontinence. And for me, that was so embarrassing. Not that I think anybody should be embarrassed by that, because it's a medical condition and you can't help it. But again, the nurses were fantastic. The nurses and the physical therapists there, they never made me feel bad about anything, and they were nothing but just very helpful and understanding and kind. And again, I went home with my parents because this was going to be a more arduous recovery. I went home with my parents, and I have wonderful friends who stepped up and now cared for my 2 babies that are my world, Louie and Sadie, because I had Sadie at this time. And it was wonderful because while I was recovering, I missed them, but I didn't have to worry about them because I knew they were in the best possible hands. So in the recovery, at first, I was not allowed to sit upright in a chair for more than 1 hour total the entire day. And then that gradually increased. I was still doing walking, and I was walking better than I had in a couple years. And then I had to go and lay down for an hour, like 2 times, once in the morning and once in the evening, or it might have been a couple hours. But anyways, and when I finally got back home, I wasn't allowed to drive at first, but eventually I did start driving. But then I realized that was not very safe because I had and still have a lot of numbness in my feet and have trouble feeling where the pedals are, and my foot would slip off, and it was just kind of dangerous. I sought out a certified driving instructor after I had been to my general practitioner's office just to see if hand controls might be an appropriate option, and she felt that it was because she did some tests, and I explained to her how my feet were feeling and what was going on. And so she said she'd sign whatever needed to be signed because I knew there had to be something signed by a doctor. But anyways, so I went through all that, and it was determined that hand controls were appropriate, and those will be installed shortly, and I am very excited about that, get a little more freedom. So I am continuing with PT, and my ankles started really bothering me, and I got different braces. And I eventually, because when I was in a checkup with when I was in a checkup with my surgeon, he referred me to an ankle and foot specialist because he suspected that I had tendonitis in my ankles because the way I'd been walking for so long. And so I saw an ankle specialist, and he had me get, I got a brace that goes on the I got a brace that goes on the outside of your shoe. It almost looks like, it kind of looks like a boot that you strap on to try to keep my ankles stable and keep me from turning at that point on the outside of my feet. And so I continue with physical therapy, and now it was determined when my ankles started feeling better and I started trying to do more activity and the pain came back, and my ankle doctor told me that I had tendonitis had flared up again, and he thinks because I have high arches and what's called claw toe, where your toes curl in, your four toes, so all of my toes, my four toes on either foot, the four smaller toes, curl in like you would imagine a claw. And I also have bunions started, where your big toe gradually moves over basically, and a big bump forms on the outside of your foot. It's basically a misalignment. But anyway, so, and I had high arches, which were contributing to this reoccurrence of tendonitis. So I had custom orthotics, which I'll get in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, but things are great, guys. I have nothing to complain about. I have wonderful friends. Yes, there are challenges. There are things I still can't do. And it's a little frustrating, I'm not going to lie. But I am beyond blessed. I have friends that help me when I get a little behind, because I can't stand for long periods of time, and it's hard to do all of the cleaning that comes with being a homeowner sometimes. And so I do have friends that have stepped up and really helped me stay on top of things, because that's something that really can affect one's mental health. I mean, at least my mental health is, if I don't have a clean house, then that's gonna make me feel some kind of way. But anyways, and I have friends that drive me to and from these doctor appointments, because my doctors are 45 minutes away from where I live, just the way it's all panned out. I share all this to say that if you or someone you love is going through if you or someone you love is going through Cauda Equina syndrome, or has had it and is dealing with the aftermath of it, there is hope. Things can get better, and I believe in my case that things could still get better. They have told me up until, we're in September now, and so up until February, things could still improve, even though with my last nerve conduction test and muscle test, it did show that there's permanent damage. But I can walk, guys. I walk with a cane, and I have braces at this point, but I can walk, and I can still go out and have fun with my friends, and I can still do things. Obviously I can't really do hiking. I loved hiking before, but who knows what the future holds. I firmly believe in my situation there's so much more to be grateful for than not. I mean, I am blessed with 2 beautiful fur babies. They are my world, and they help me keep my sanity through all this. And I just don't know what I would do without my wonderful friends and family. And physical therapists is amazing. They're amazing. The physical therapists I see are amazingly awesome. We'll have to, anyways. are amazingly awesome. But I am open to questions or comments and anybody wanting to share their experiences. Feel free to like this video if you enjoyed this content, and please subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Stay safe out there. Bye.